It's my great pleasure to present our paper, The Evolution of Moral Belief Systems Across 4 Decades, Different Pathways for Universal and Culture-Specific Moralities. My name is Melanie Vauclair. This study has been developed together with Raoul, Henrik, and Plummen. To give you a brief background into the topic of morality. So morality is something that exists in all cultures. It is this shared understanding of what is morally right and wrong, and people have very, very strong opinions about them. It is functional, it makes group living easier by regulating self-interest, and is vital for the well-functioning of any culture in society. But here's the thing, so some aspects of morality seem to be more shared than others, while some aspects of morality seem to have shifted over the past decades, leading to even polarization and controversies in societies. And what I mean by that will become clear in a minute when I give you some examples. And so some controversial moral issues we can think of pertain to those that have something to do with individual choices, such as homosexuality, for example. In the 1950s, homosexuality was still criminal in most West European countries. This is no longer the case. Shifts have also happened in other areas, such as divorce or euthanasia. And so it seems that there is a tendency towards greater leniency in regard to these issues. At the same time, there is still controversy and even changes in legislation, for example, in regard to abortion, which also has something to do with individual choice. And so in Poland, for instance, last year, the court ruling was that there is now a near total ban on abortion, and something similar is happening in the US. And so there are voices who want to stop abortion, others who want to keep it legal. And so there are these different opinions about this very issue that has something to do with individual choices. Now, on the other hand, there are other moral issues where people are also quite convinced that this is right or wrong, or rather wrong, and that are not so controversial. And these pertain to issues that have something to do with cheating and unfairness. So here we can think of the Enron scandal, for instance. Enron was this American company that in 2001 became known for institutionalized accounting fraud. And so this caused a great moral outrage, and they were widely condemned. And this was seen as something deeply immoral, what they engaged in. And so there seems to be these two facets of morality. And what we want to do in this study is to show how they may have developed across countries over recent times. You would expect different pathways of these two moral facets. And we want to show also how this larger socio-ecological environment can explain the evolution of those two facets of morality. And to do so, we take an interdisciplinary approach, and we draw on political science, evolutionary biology and psychology, and also cross-cultural psychology. So what do we know about these two facets of morality? Together with Ron Fisher, we had conducted a study where we looked at the morally debatable behavior scale in the European and World Value Survey, and that contains items that tap into these two facets. So here we have attitudes towards individuals' freedom of choice about how to live their lives, for instance, homosexuality, which we refer to as personal sexual behaviors, and attitudes towards cheating and free-riding behaviors, such as accepting a bribe, which we refer to as dishonest illegal behaviors. The prediction was that individualistic cultures should be more tolerant than collectivistic cultures in regard to personal sexual behaviors, because individualistic cultures prioritize individuals' interests, while collectivistic cultures prioritize group interests. At the same time, we also expected that cultural values should not have any predictive power in regard to dishonest illegal issues, because humans have developed universal moral codes of social cooperation as an evolutionary advantage. And so these type of issues should be widely condemned as wrong, and there should be no culture that would actually produce values that would relate to these issues as something that is acceptable. So the results corroborated the predictions about the two facets of morality, but a limitation of the study was that we didn't study a change in moral attitudes over time. So when we consider changes in moral outlook, we can draw on two distinct literatures. So one is on evolutionary biology and psychology, and the other is in political science. So one deals with genetic evolution, and evolutionary theorists have argued that there are universal cooperation norms that have evolved as pro-social behavioral strategies because they have an evolutionary advantage. And so evolution happens via Darwinian mechanisms through genetic transmission. At the same time, there's also a facultative mechanism that can kick in. In other words, so those pro-social behavioral strategies are subjected to if-then decision rules. So people cooperate with others if others also do cooperate. Otherwise, these norms can become corrupted. In regard to cultural evolution, Ingelhard has argued in his evolutionary modernization theory that culture-specific individual choice norms develop when people grow up in a context of existential security, because this shifts people's goals from survival to individual freedom. And so pro-fertility norms, such as condemning homosexuality or abortion, are no longer adaptive. And evolution happens here via intergenerational population replacement. So our hypotheses were that cooperation norms should change less than individual choice norms over time, just because of their evolutionary nature. They are so deeply ingrained in our human psyche. The second hypothesis was that there should be if there is an increase in material security in a country, it should lead to a greater endorsement of individual choice norms following evolutionary modernization theory. The third hypothesis was that countries that become more unjust, or we also say more dysfunctional over time, should show a decrease in cooperation norms. And so this draws on the facultative mechanism of the evolutionary theory. In terms of methods, we use data from the European and World Value Survey on the morally debatable behavior scale, which includes items on dishonest, illegal, and personal sexual issues, so these two moral facets. We use time series data over 4 decades, from 1981 to 2021, with 115 countries, 528 country time units, and over 645,000 respondents. Regarding the analysis, we employed a random effects within and between model. We had 3 levels, so individuals or cohorts were nested within country time, or the year of the survey, the time period, which again were nested within country. This type of analysis allowed us distinguishing between 2 types of contextual effects, that is time invariant and time variant. So time invariant effects are effects between countries. So we could model differences between countries, and time varying effects allowed us to model or to test our dynamic hypothesis about how changes in the societal level characteristics are related to changes in moral attitudes. When we got to the results, first I present you effect analysis on the full sample, which shows also the items that we used. So here you can see that they cluster into 2 groups. This in the top, you can see the dishonest illegal issues, cheating on taxes, claiming government benefits, accepting a bribe, avoiding fare on public transport. And then we have here the personal sexual issues, which are prostitution, suicide, homosexuality, euthanasia, abortion, and divorce. We first looked at general period and cohort effects in regard to the justifiability of personal sexual issues. What you can see here at the bottom is the year of the survey. So from 1981 to 2021, these are the period effects. In cohort effects, you can see cohorts born before 1940 up to after 1988. And higher numbers always indicate greater leniency, greater justifiability, or greater tolerance in regard to these issues. So what you can see here is that across the whole sample of countries, period effects are strong and positive, indicating that the world is moving towards becoming more lenient in regard to these issues. The cohort trend is similar to the period trend, but there's a certain stagnation here. So the younger generations are quite similar in regard to the moral outlook. Now compare this to the justifiability of dishonest legal issues. Again, higher numbers indicate greater leniency, tolerance, or acceptance of now cheating behaviors. Okay? And what we can see here is that, again, there is actually a trend towards greater acceptance of these type of behaviors, but it's much weaker than for personal sexual and moral issues. And the same is true for the cohort effects. Okay, so what we can verify here is that our expectation that the deeper changes are happening really in the personal sexual domain, not in the dishonest and legal sphere. And the lion's share of changes goes through fast period effects and the remaining then via delayed cohort replacement. Now here we looked at the whole sample of countries, but this conceals a large amount of potential cross-country heterogeneity. So next we aim to consider that by looking at countries at different levels of human development. And so we have here cross-level interaction effects, and I will only present the period effects, not the cohort effects for the sake of time. First, personal sexual moral attitudes. So in red, you have the slope for very high HDIs or very highly developed countries. In blue, medium and low developed countries, and orange, the high developed countries. And what you can see here is the countries with very high levels of human development have become a lot more lenient over time. They already start out at higher levels of tolerance, but they have become also the most lenient group of countries in the world. In comparison, high HDI countries have not changed much over time, and medium-low HDI countries have changed. They were the least lenient, and now they are similar to the high HDI countries, hold a similar position here. Now we can compare this again to also the effects and period effects for dishonest illegal moral attitudes. So again, here we can see great heterogeneity by level of human development. Countries with very high HDI, they are virtually unchanged in regard to these issues. Nations with high level of HDI show like a slight slope towards more leniency. But it is really the medium and low HDI countries that are the most interesting here, because they have a clear pattern in the direction of increasing leniency towards uncooperative and cheating behaviors. Okay? So next, we wanted to substitute the period variables of the year of the survey by something more meaningful, a meaningful indicator and predictor of the societal context. And we considered first the change in GDP per capita over time, or in other words, economic growth, to predict justifiability of personal sexual moral attitudes. And so we have again here the different HDI categories, and here this is now economic growth over time within a country. And what we can see here is that change in these moral beliefs is clearly connected to changes in GDP per capita in both very high and medium-low HDI countries, but not so in the high HDI countries. It's quite intriguing, and so we followed this up also with an analysis where we considered individualism, collectivism, cultural values as cross-level moderators. And so what you can see here is in blue, countries that are individualistic, and in black, countries that are collectivistic. And again, we have here a change in economic growth over time as a predictor of personal sexual moral attitudes. And so what we can see here is that the more individualistic a country, the more it changes its moral beliefs in the personal sexual domain as a result of increasing economic development. So that's a within effect. But this is not the case for countries endorsing collectivistic values. And so the cultural background of a society also moderates the effect of economic growth on this facet of morality. Next, we aimed to model something similar for dishonest illegal moral attitudes, but taking into account to what extent a society is unjust. And a very good indicator of that is inequality. Unfortunately, we did not have data for all waves of the survey in countries in terms of inequality. And so we were only able to model this so we're not able to model the thin change within a country, but only to consider whether there has been an increase in inequality from the beginning to the end of the time series. Okay, and so what we can see here is countries of different levels of inequality. In black, those who are low inequality, and blue, high inequality, and orange, those who are in between. Now, for those who are high in inequality, the blue, what we can see is that they become more accepting, tolerant of dishonest illegal behaviors, and the opposite happens for those who are low in inequality, and the others are somewhere in between. So this is basically what we also expected. The more unfair, unjust society becomes, the more people become accepting of cheating behaviors. So what does this mean? We found different trajectories and moralities. In personal sexual moral attitudes, we found that increased existential security and cultural values explain the moral outlook. Cultural values can probably explain the continued polarization of these issues within and between societies, despite economic growth. And for dishonest, illegal, moral attitudes, we found that unjust societies create environments in which cheating and free riding is more adaptive, and leading to a gradual change of something that's a very fundamental moral outlook regarding social cooperation. And we think that this may create a vicious circle leading to worsening of the situation when in a country increasingly dysfunctional. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and your questions.